Welcome to Channel X TV. Delighted to be joined today by Paul Stafford, Head of Retail Media at Superdrug or AS Watson Group. So welcome, Paul. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. So just tell us a little bit about your role. How long have you been with Superdrug, and what's your remit with the company?
Yeah, so basically, I've been at Superdrug now 3.5 years. Prior to that, I've worked for big brands like PepsiCo, Virgin Media, and I've been working within the retail media piece. I would like to say 3 years as well. So I started off managing the digital marketing and design teams, everything to do with e-commerce, basically. So driving kind of the sales on our .com growth. But I could see, through Twitter chatter, through LinkedIn chatter, that retail media was just getting bigger and bigger. So then I reached out to somebody to find out a bit more information about it. And at the same time, I also found out that AS Watson has a retail media business out in China, and they were looking to start it up here in Europe. So I managed to get onto the relevant teams at Steerco's here about 3 years ago, and then build it up from there. So I say 3 years been working on it. And then it got 2 years to doing all the process, the pitches and operational stuff that needs to go with it, because you don't just turn on sponsored products on one day. It's complex. But we've been live about a year now.
And I think, am I right in thinking that the retail media product offering is called OptimO?
Correct. Yeah.
Where did the name come from?
Yeah, good question. So if I had a diagram here, or maybe you can put one up in the post-production piece. So it's OptimO, it's OPTIMO, right? So just use your imagination here. O, the T is a plus, and the other O is another O. So that's online plus offline. And I guess that's the sort of kind of like the proposition we have. It's an online and offline proposition. So here in the UK, for example, we've got 800 stores, which is a huge valuable proposition in terms of retail media for our brands. But we also have a heavily trafficked website as well. So I guess like a USP for us versus Amazon is that we have that bricks and mortar piece. So by having that OptimO in our brand title, it goes through everything that we do. So we started off on site first, but we're slowly moving, or not slowly, quickly moving into the off-site world.
I think that's fascinating, because most people, when you talk retail media, they immediately think, oh yeah, that's going to be on a brand website. They don't necessarily think about it in store. So how does the kind of proposition change when you're in store, and how are you going to display it in store? Is it going to be screens, or what's the proposition?
I couldn't say for right now, but maybe potentially we might be looking at digital screens. We see that the likes of Tesco, Nectar 360, Co-op recently have all announced that they've got screens inventory. So it makes perfect sense as well. If you go back to we've 800 stores across different areas we've got like metropolitan stores, highly footfall stores, we've got, retail park stores, we've got shopping center stores. So you can imagine that kind of a lot of people passing by those. We would have great frontage there to capture that audience. But also then internally as well, we've got fragrance counters, we've got makeup aisles. So potentially, if we were looking at that, we could start to have digital advertising at point of conversion, really, point of consideration, high consideration to sell to brands. But there's lots of other stuff you can do as well. I mean, retail media, I guess, for Superdrug has been around since the 90s anyway, because we already trade POS, right? So that's part of JBP processes. We've got things like digital radio, but you could even kind of extend it out to in-store experiential makeup artists. You might have L'Oreal might have a key influencer for NPD. They might want to have that person. So I guess it's almost endless, really, which is, I think, is the really interesting thing about retail media.
Yeah, I think it's like much of e-commerce, as you say, a lot of it's been around forever with in-store experiences or online advertising. We're just, I guess we're just calling it by a different name and having different processes to run it.
Yeah. And I think kind of one thing that, we've been clear at here at Superdrug is that it's all incremental, right? So on one side, you've got the legacy JBP stuff, right? And that is, that's not going to change wherever. So you've got those existing agreements. Everything that we do through OptimO is incremental to that as well. So we got to try and find out where that money is, or revenue is net new. All right. So that's kind of like, so you've got like on site, which is, we've never sold that inventory before. We're using audiences for social media and offsite display. So those things are easy to start to get your teeth into, and maybe further down the track, you might try and unpick that to create that full sort of like retail media offering between JBPs. But, we're not even looking at that right now.
So you launched OptimO about a year ago, I think. So what's the first year looked like, and what can you tell us some of the partners that have been on board and some of the maybe the unexpected successes? Who's been successful with retail media and Superdrug that maybe you wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, look, I think we're very fortunate, working in health and beauty, and we work with sort of like some of the biggest global brands in the world: L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Coty, Reckitt. The list really does go on. These guys all have retail media as sort of like a global priority for those, right? It's probably under top 3 or 5. They all have been working in some shape or form, definitely across Amazon. Amazon is a big part for a lot of their business as well. So we can't not talk about Amazon when we talk about retail media, and now the retailer space is emerging as well. So we've seen these brands that are almost ready to go. They've been kind of waiting for us to make it available. We see like Boots are obviously live, and Tesco. So, we took our time because we want to get everything right. But I think kind of like we're lucky that some brands are still in test and learn, or maybe advanced, that it made an easier play to sell it in because they've had that experience. Obviously, the difficulty then is making sure that you deliver on your promise, that we have, brilliant data, brilliant audiences, whatever, to deliver on your ROAS or whatever the KPI might be. So it's been a really interesting year from that run. But I guess where it's going to get even more interesting is year 2, when we move away from test and learn, where there's more scrutiny. So I'm expecting that from our suppliers in 2025. I'm looking forward to it, to be honest.
And do you mind sharing which platform you chose for your retail media? Because I know there's a huge choice out there, and what made you choose them?
Yeah, well, we chose Criteo. So that's who we were on stage with at the event last month.
When you spoke at Channel X conference, yeah.
Exactly. So I was on stage with Andy Stephen from Criteo. I guess what it came down to is global scale, and a bit of reputation really as well, right? Because we are expanding this across, Europe and so on. So you needed a partner that really knows what they're doing when you want to launch in Netherlands or France or wherever it might be as well. So super comfortable with them. They've obviously got a wealth of experience in the sort of like traditional sort of programmatic business as well. And I guess a good culture fit as well. Everyone that we know at Criteo, we're just, fully capable or fully in safe hands, no task is too big. I think it's just a really good partnership, to be honest.
And you've mentioned quite a few of your high street compatriots that also are using retail media. Where do you see it going in the future? Do you see this as becoming a sort of a certain percentage of the business, or is this something that can grow and grow and grow?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think kind of like I think about it a lot. There's, some brands will survive and some brands, retailers will survive, I think, and some retailers will struggle, because there's going to be a proliferation of RMNs out there. And we already see that everybody is setting up a retail media network, right? But brands, and on the other side, you've got so much choice. Their media plans are just going to be, highly disconnected potentially, unless their agency or their in-house teams, whoever's looking, can manage that. But then as well, do you want to be having you've got your Amazon sided plan, but then you've got your retail media plan, or shop, whatever they call it, 10, 15 different retailers as well, with pithy amounts potentially.
It's like the amount of marketplaces people sell on now, and obviously Superdrug are also involved in marketplaces.
We have, yeah. So it's really interesting. I think it's still very early doors, and we're working a lot with some of the big agency holdcos. Everyone's got scorecards, all the standardization piece as well. So I suppose in order to stay ahead, we really need to be able to serve what the agencies and brands wants to a certain extent as well, and make sure that we're delivering those results, so that when potentially, if that time does come, that decisions need to be made around investment or whatever, that we're front and center of those processes. And I think kind of going back to the original bit around 800 stores and a super successful .com business, we'll be in a really good position, depending on our offering.
So I know you're still kind of in the test and learn phase, but we've spoken quite a lot about retail media today from kind of the advertiser side. But can you tell us a bit from the consumer side? When I go onto a Superdrug website, or potentially in store in the future, what am I being presented with? At what points along my buying journey do I see retail media? Is it when I'm just doing a search and browse? Is it on a product page? Is it at checkout? Where are you intersecting with the consumer, and where do you see most success with that?
Yeah, so we have a good spread, I believe, of sponsored products and sponsored display on site, right? So we have inventory available on the homepage. Homepage is interesting because it's obviously the most heavily trafficked page on .com as well, but it doesn't get a high click-through for us as well. But essentially what that means is that brands essentially get like free impressions or high visibility. But then we have PDP, PLP, and so on. So it goes right down throughout the rest of the pages. But we also have interest in kind of like placements around interstitial as well. So kind of like our basket as well. So kind of like to try and get that add-on. So we're really kind of careful around where we place it so we don't overload it. But we also want to make sure that it's part of like that seamless journey as well. We're not available on the app just yet, but that's coming as well. So that'll be super interesting. So, about 25% of our transactions go through app as well. So it makes perfect sense to be available there as well. So,
especially as I guess app customers are probably your most loyal customers.
Yeah, 100%, and again, that then ties into kind of like the root sort of driver for us as a retail media network, loyalty and data, because we've built our platform across 18.1 million health and beauty card owners or subscribers, whatever you call them. So having that data and funneling that through to all those pieces we just talked about is like the secret sauce that we have.
So retail media not going away, and definitely not on Superdrug. For those that want to work with you, how do they? What's the best way of getting in touch with either you or your team? Is it through LinkedIn? Is there a page on the website for retail media? How do they get hold of you?
Yeah, good question. Well, we work in both self-service and managed service ways, right? So if you want to run a campaign through Criteo, you can talk to, if you've got an in-house team, you can talk to your Criteo sales team. If you want to instruct your agency, if that's where your bookings are going through, talk to your agency, they'll reach out to us directly. You can just reach out to us directly as well. We have monthly emails that goes out to all our suppliers and brands that we work with. Some people have gone through LinkedIn as well. So we have an OptimO page on LinkedIn if you want to follow that as well. So we're pretty much kind of like direct through your agency or, through LinkedIn, which is a small amount, but we still get some.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for your time.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.